Hey guys, today I will be reading a two-shot fic, Catching a Stray is Not As Easy As It Sounds, by Zarus. This is the second fic in the series, so please make sure to check out the other video. I'll raise you up, even when they strike you down. Other than that, summary should be in description. So far, the evening has proven itself an uneventful one. Some heroes might shy away from thinking such thoughts, afraid of jinxing themselves and ending up with much more drama than they wanted to handle. Razorhead was not such a hero. He liked to think of himself as a logical man, and did not entertain such superstitious beliefs that one can seal one's own fate by thinking about the eventfulness of one's evening. Still, it was somewhat unusual. His patrol would soon be coming to a close, and aside from stopping a would-be mugging early on, his afternoon turned night had been largely uninteresting. Taking a running leap to the next rooftop, Shouta creeps over to the edge of the other side, and looks down into the street below his rooftop perch. This area was somewhat notorious for its gang violence, and almost every time he has passed by, previously in the past 2 months, he had ended up having to deal with some sort of incident or another. However, the street was completely devoid of people now. Even the local homeless people had retreated, probably looking for warmer haunts than the biting chill this place offered. A figure round the corner of one of the buildings and walked into view, kicking an empty soda can with enough force to send the small object flying down the road, with a loud clatter in the otherwise silent night. Angry, the hero notes, as he takes a moment to observe them from his rooftop perch. The lone figure sporting dark pants and an equally dark hoodie, with the hood pulled up. There was a scarf wrapped around the lower half of their face, which, along with the hood, efficiently hid their feature behind cloth and shadow. The figure walked with their hands in their pockets, and a somewhat hunched posture, either from the obvious anger or from the chilling air, most likely. While being upset certainly wasn't illegal, and in and of itself, Shouta knew this area was notoriously poor and unfortunately a hotspot for drugs and violent crime. Taking a couple of minutes to keep an eye on one of its obviously agitated inhabitants towards the end of his patrol wouldn't really be a waste of his time, since there was nothing else going on at the moment. Decision made, the hero takes a quick moment to scan the area again, before deeming it clear. He was almost done with his patrol now. Only a rough half an hour remained. His eyes flicked down to the figure again. They were closer now, walking slightly faster in the typical manner of an agitated person. Shouta trails after them, silently, keeping himself out of sight by stalking across the conveniently nearby rooftops. Observing the figure below, he tries to deduce their gender. Baggy clothes combined with the dimming light makes it hard to tell if they're male or female, but going from height and stature they were probably a woman, or possibly an adolescent. It wasn't an uncommon sight to see children and teenagers being roped into joining the local gangs, usually used as messengers or small-time dealers, disposable cannon fodder for people who belong behind bars. Shouta dearly hoped it isn't a teenager, though his instincts are telling him it is. Typical teenager attire aside, the boldness of walking around alone in this district at this time of night reminded him a little bit too much of his own occasional bull-headed students. Shouta might be wrong, and he hopes that he is, because there were very few good reasons for a half-grown kid to be stalking around angrily outside so late at night, underdressed for the cold weather in one of the poorer parts of town. The figure grows less visibly angry as the minutes pass by, the agitation slowly sleeping out their frame as their pace slows. Steps slowly start to drag in a tired manner. Something about the way the figure holds themselves seems familiar though, and there's nagging feeling of recognition in the back of his mind. Shouta doesn't think anyone he knows lives in the area. His friends certainly don't, and none of his students currently live in the very poor districts, much less here. While he can't exactly claim to have memorized the addresses of all of his acquaintances, it was all likelihood a stranger, though he hadn't become the hero he was by ignoring his instincts. Something about them was familiar. While the hero ponders the identity of the person, the mystery figure below eventually comes to a stop by the mouth of an alley, all signs of agitation gone as they slump against the wall, looking more tired and defeated than anything else. They were probably not about to commit any sort of violent crime at this point, going from their body language. There was very little point in him sticking around any longer, having done his due diligence as a hero. Still, the nagging itch in the back of his mind persists. Curiosity gets the better of him, and the hero creeps as close as he can at the risk of being seen, peering down at the mystery person below as he tries to get a glimpse of their face under the hood. Suddenly, the figure lifts a hand, running it through their hair, in what seems to be like a frustrated gesture, dislodging their hood in the process, and Shouta recognizes the now visible violet hair immediately. Hitoshi? The hero blinks, then immediately narrows his eyes at the unexpected sight, as the puzzle pieces of nagging familiarity click together in his mind. What could the boy be doing all the way out here, at this time of night? Because it was his student standing here, huddled in on himself in two thin garments, looking more like a street kid than a student successfully attending a prestigious school. The teen's lower face might be covered by a scarf, but even so, Shouta would have recognized the wild mop of unusually coloured hair anywhere. It had already passed midnight, but the teacher didn't seem to be hurried to get home. Shouta knew for the fact that the kid didn't live anywhere even remotely close to the area, so this shouldn't be any reason for them to be here in the first place, especially not so late on a school night. Looking for trouble? Maybe some people jump to that conclusion based on the teenager's quirk, but Shouta knows the kid. He doubts that his student is out here for any illegitimate reason. Still, that left the question, why was he here? He ponders the mystery as he keeps an eye on the boy, mind running with possibilities. It wasn't really inconceivable that the boy knew someone in the area, though it was certainly a bit too late for social visits. The kid had been angry, though, from a fight. The boy wasn't showing obvious signs of injury or pain, going from the way he'd walked, from the way he'd helped himself. Shouta finds himself intrigued, but decides he wasn't going to get any satisfaction. But decides that he isn't going to get any satisfactory answers from up here. Figuring that he might as well confront the kid directly, he throws his capture weapon at the opposing building fire escape, securing a safe descent, and lets himself drop into the alleyway. "Hey kid," he greets casually as he touches down to the next to his student. Shouta doesn't bother to hide his amusement as the boy physically jumps in alarm at his sudden presence, and the hero catches the startled punch the kid throws at his face with ease born of many years of practice. Good reaction time," the teacher in him praises before adding, "but you weren't paying enough attention to your surroundings. I've been tailing you for 7 minutes now." Shouta expects either a surprise greeting or possibly an annoyed huff at his antics as he lets go of the kid's fist, but the boy just draws his hand back silently and tugs at his scarf in a self-conscious manner. Nonplussed, at the boy's silence, the hero follows up with a question. It's a bit late to be wandering around outside, don't you think? The student buries his face deeper in his scarf, shifting his feet. Strangely, the kid stays silent. Still doesn't respond. And there was something off. The teen might not be one of his most talkative students, far from it. But the kid never ignored a direct question either. You're quiet today, Shouta observes out loud, folding his arms across his chest. Something the matter, kid? His student shakes his head in the negative, denying the words. Shouta arches a disbelieving eyebrow. The boy stops, hesitates, fiddles with the hem of his scarf, anxiously, but still keeps his silence. Talk to me, he says, though it probably sounds more like an order than a request he intended it as. Because the kid twitches guiltily in the response to his words. A long moment drags in utter silence, and just when the hero is starting to think the kid is actually going to refuse without any explanation, the kid shakes his head again before lifting his hands, and with a quick, nervous movement, the boy signs, I can't talk. Somewhat caught off guard, Shouta is surprised that his student knows sign language. His own knowledge stemming from long hours of practice with a much younger Hisashi, his deaf friend who wanted a way to communicate, even without his hearing aids. As far as the hero knew, the kid didn't have any deaf friends. Maybe one of his foster siblings? He pushed his surprise aside, as none of that was really relevant right now. You can't talk? He confirms instead, because that was somewhat concerning. The kid had lost his voice due to sickness, which would explain the scarf at least, though he should definitely not be walking around outside without a proper jacket in this cold weather. How come? The boy doesn't respond, nor does he lift his hand to explain in sign. He just hunches his shoulders and averts his eyes as he stares at the ground in what seems like shame. The hero doesn't understand how that could possibly be the case, until the kid slowly, haltingly lifts up a hand, tugs at the frayed scarf covering his face. Concern flashes into anger as the kid pulls down the scarf, not to show skin, but the hard edges of a muzzle. As a hero, Shouta was no stranger to the many forms of quirk restraints, and was familiar enough to be frustrated by the lack of laws that governed their use. Use of quirk restraints on criminals was a given safety measure, but the use of restraints on children was not illegal. The children in question had what could be vaguely labelled as a dangerous quirk. Of course, it was generally frowned upon to use quirk restraints on children. The vast majority of people didn't do it, and it was most practiced in cases where the child had a dangerous quirk that they couldn't control. Shouta despised the practice of unnecessary quirk regulators on children. All children could and should be taught quirk control. With patience, time, and practice, excessive restraints took away that option to learn. To just slap restraints on a kid and call it a day, that wasn't just abusive, it was inhumane. Hitoshi didn't even have control issues. The hero knew that for a fact. Neither did the teenager have a habit of misusing his quirk. There should be no reason to restrain him at all. Yet someone had muzzled his kid, damn it. And the hero had to swallow the bitter pill that he couldn't even use that as evidence of abuse, because it wasn't illegal. Fury boiled into his blood at the injustice of it, at his own inability to arrest the fuckers that had done this. Shouta knew who likely the perpetrators were. The kid's foster parents had been on his radar for the likely abusive ways for some time now, though despite his best efforts he hadn't been able to get the teenager to confess anything, and hadn't been able to dig up enough evidence to get the boy removed from their care. Clenching his hands in his fists, he imagines giving them a piece of his fucking mind. I'm sorry, the kid signs, still looking at the ground, not meeting his eyes. For not responding. I didn't mean to ignore you. As if that was what Shouta was upset about. I am rather upset right now, he admits tersely, because the teenager has clearly picked up on his anger, and lying about it wasn't going to set the boy at ease. But not with you, he adds, just before the kid can get the wrong idea. He draws a deep breath, deliberately calming himself down. Justified or not, his anger serves no purpose here. The kid had obviously already suffered enough a difficult evening, and there was no point in stressing him out even more. Come here, kid. Shouta speaks as he pushes down his frustration, taking a step closer to the boy who's not looking at him. Let's get that off. He reaches out to inspect the device, only for the kid to flinch away hard at the touch, back hitting the brick wall behind him. There's a second of pause, before the teenager visibly gathers himself again, looking frustrated, and steps forward. Shouta doesn't comment on it. He doesn't make it a big deal. He just reaches forward again and doesn't say anything. When the teen stiffens under his touch, when the boy forces himself to stand still as the hero tilts his head to the side and inspects the device with a critical eye, it bothers him that the kid still flinches from him. Frustration didn't quite cover it, but it was frustrating to find the kid still looking at him with a mix of warier. Frustration didn't quite cover it, but it was frustrating to find the kid still looking at him with a mix of wariness and resignation whenever Shouta found himself upset. Like the boy expected to find himself the target of his anger, expected to be hit. Bothered him, but the hero's not surprised. Instincts didn't develop without a reason, and overcoming habits formed to keep oneself alive was a massive, time-consuming process, and the hero was not slightest bit convinced that said instincts weren't still being reinforced, didn't still serve their purpose. The kid was being hit at home. Shouta was certain of it. He didn't have proof. He didn't have anything he could use as evidence aside from telling mannerisms and recurring bruises from the boy would always explain away. It pains him that his students still didn't trust him enough to ask for help. It troubles him greatly that the boy feels like he still needs to hide his injuries, feels like he has to protect the very people Shouta is convinced keep hurting him. Frustrating as it is, the hero didn't do anything. If the kid refused to talk, the teenager was determined to keep his silence on the matter. The only thing he could do was try to establish himself as safe, to gain the boy's trust. Like trying to win over a stray cat, he thinks to himself, as he finds the lock hidden underneath the scarf, where the straps connect, at the base of the teenager's head. Pretty standard design. I should be able to get this open, he says wholly, for the kid's benefit. After inspecting the lock, take off your scarf, then hold still. Following his order, the teenager pulls off the cloth, unraveling the scarf with a harsh tug. The fabric slides from his neck, exposing the contraption and the lock in its entirety, along a large, dark bruise previously covered by. Following his orders, the teenager pulls a cloth, unraveling the scarf with a harsh tug. The fabric slides from his neck, exposing the contraption and the lock in its entirety, along a large, dark bruise previously covered and hidden by the fabric. Shouta very deliberately does not look too hard at it, does not think about how the boy likely received it, or about the likelihood of there being more such bruises decorated his student's skin under those clothes. Well, Maybe he does, but he's careful not to let the anger show. He does not tighten his fingers around the lock, keeping his student muzzled like an animal. He keeps his movements calm, slow, and controlled. He buries his simmering rage down deep within his heart, awaiting more deserving targets than one beat-up, skittish kid. Fishing out his lockpicks from his tool belt, the hero gets to work picking the lock. It wasn't a particularly difficult lock by his standards, but it wasn't a cheap type of lock that could be just jammed with a paperclip into and twist either. The angle would make picking it awkward too, so it's not surprised that his student had been able to get the thing off by himself. After a minute of work, he twists the tension wrench one final time, and feels the lock give under his administrations. The teenager wrenches the muzzle from his face and sucks in a ragged breath. And Shouta tucks away his tools and gives the boy a moment to collect himself. "Thank you," the kid rasps out after a minute, sounding so genuinely grateful that it almost hurts to listen to. "Anytime, kid," he says, because he wants nothing more than the boy to realize that he can ask for help when he needs it. Shrugging off his backpack, the kid stuffs the device into the depths before pulling out a bottle of water and downing half of its contents, wiping his face with his sleeve and sliding down the nearby alley wall into a sitting position. The boy looks exhausted, Shouta thinks to himself. He finds himself sitting down next to the kid, leaning his head against the wall behind him. Maybe he jinxed himself earlier, because instead of a quiet and uneventful evening, he now has to deal with the emotional fallout of whatever this is. Somewhat forcibly, he shoves a nonsensical thought away. Not that he regrets following the kid for a single moment, because he would rather sit through 100 emotional conversations than let any one of his students suffer alone in silence. Shouta makes himself as comfortable as he can next to his protégé. They sit in silence for a moment before the boy eventually breaks it. "I'm sorry," the teenager rasps, hugging his backpack to his chest, staring at his shoes. The shoes in question appear quite worn. He's noticed that his student doesn't have dedicated gym shoes during training. He wonders idly if the kid would accept if Shouta bought him new shoes. Something to consider. "What for?" he asks. "Just for making you do this," the kid mutters, not looking at him. You can leave if you want. I'm fine." Shouta generously gives the boy 5 seconds of silence to withdraw that absolutely ridiculous apology before he lifts his arm and cuffs the teen lightly on the back of his head. "Don't be an idiot, kid," he huffs. "I obviously couldn't leave you like that, and if you genuinely think that I'm going to abandon you here alone in one of these sketchier crime-ridden districts in the middle of the night, you obviously need to learn some sense." "Sorry," the kid apologizes again, and he can hear the boy smiling, properly chastised. He pulls his arm around his student's shoulder and is pleased when the boy doesn't react negatively to the touch, when he feels some of the tension leave the too-thin frame. "Tell me what happened," he urges after a few moments, when it becomes clear that his pupil isn't going to take initiative to explain. "I was stupid," the kid mutters eventually, voice dripping dark with anger. "I broke a rule." Shouta can't tell if the anger he hears in the teenager's voice is self-directed, or if it's directed at his so-called guardians. He has a worrying feeling that it is the former. And then what? He digs, frustrated on the teenager's behalf. "They responded by muzzling you?" "Using quirk regulators." The kid utters the word with no small amount of disdain. "On your kids, it isn't illegal if they have dangerous quirks, and you have reasonably concern for your or someone else's safety." The teenager says words the words almost as if he's quoting something, and Shouta wonders if that's exactly what the law says. The boy is obviously familiar with it. It shouldn't be. He responds lowly, tightening his hold on his student. Shouta doesn't get a response from that, but he isn't expecting one either. He's surprised that the kid has been willing to offer any information at all. Considering the topic, the boy was always so careful with what he said about his fosters, carefully avoiding any implication that they might be abusive. Maybe the kid didn't consider what happened to be abuse, on the merit that it hadn't technically been illegal, he wonders. Is this something that happens frequently? If we could get the kid to open up about some of the less pleasant, though still frustrating legal parts of his home, then maybe you could use that as a foundation for eventually getting the kid to admit the less legal parts. If you could get the kid to see that his treatment wasn't acceptable, then maybe you could get the boy to trust him enough to help. Trust took time to build. Time, work, patience. When he wanted to win over a stray cat, he needed to gain its trust first. Establish himself as safe. Take one step at a time. Wait for the cat to come to him. Food was certainly a great motivator too, and of course, but Shouta was confident in his ability to build trust without. Winning the trust of a stray kid shouldn't be that different when it came down to it, but there was a bit more nuance in human interaction. But the core principles were the same. Less bribery of food perhaps, but actually, Shouta muses, turning the sudden strike of inspiration over in his head. Bribing the kid with food might be an excellent idea. Boy was clearly not well fed, and he wasn't putting on as much muscle as he should have been. Shouta didn't really know if meal restrictions was a punishment the boy had to suffer, but honestly, the hero would not be surprised if that was the case. Not with how thin the boy still felt underneath those layers. He could take the kid out to eat after training, perhaps. Maybe claim it as a reward for a job well done. The boy was skittish about it. Worst case scenario, he told you would just decline it in favour of eating at home. Maybe prove that his foster parents weren't complete fucking assholes at the same time. No, not really, Teenager in his grip replies after a moment, dragging the hero away from his scheming thoughts and bringing him back to the present. They generally have fixed punishment for specific rules. I don't have to wear it. For, say, disrespect. The kid runs a hand through his hair. Thank God, he mutters under his breath, with no small amount of relief in his voice, before continuing more loudly. Just quirk-related stuff. Really, that they're afraid of my quirk. The way the kid had said thank God for not being able to wear the inhumane device for being disrespectful told Shouta two different, very important things. The boy got punished for being disrespectful, and it was apparently something that happened frequently. The recurring bruises he found on the kid's skin were any indication, and they were, the hero had a pretty good guess as to what the punishment might be. And wasn't that interesting? How Shouta didn't really seem to experience too much of this seemingly blatant, chronic disrespect that his guardians had likely punished the boy for so often. He himself had additional authority figure who spent a lot of time with the kid, and the teenager could certainly be a stubborn brat, have a smart mouth on occasion. Shouta rarely felt like the boy said or did anything that warranted actual punishment. The only behaviour the kid displayed that truly frustrated him was the incessant lying. But it wasn't like Shouta couldn't understand why the boy felt the need to lie about his injuries. Felt the need to make up stories and bluff, pretend, deceive. As an underground hero, Shouta had met many people in bad situations, kids suffering under the hands of the parents, men and women stuck in volatile relationships. Elders even trapped by circumstances and abusive relatives. Confronted with the truth, most would tell a lie, come up with some excuse in an attempt to mislead, convince him and sometimes themselves that his suspicions were unfounded. Some were just too afraid to speak up, scared for the safety of themselves and someone they cared about. Others were sometimes brainwashed into thinking the abuse was somehow their own fault. Their self-esteem crushed, believed they deserved what they got. It wasn't exactly uncommon for victims to lie to protect their abusers. So Shouta didn't hold it against the kid, even if he would really prefer that boy just talk to him already instead. "What's the punishment for disrespect?" he asked lightly. The boy stiffens under his arm for a split second, lightening quick before obviously forcing himself to be less tense, clearly not having expected Shouta to focus on that part of his statement. "Just the normal stuff," the kid replies with a shrug, tone admirably disinterested as he attempts to dismiss the topic. Shouta hums in mock thoughtful interest, not so easily dismissed. "Enlighten me." Several moments pass by slowly in silence. Shouta wonders if his kid is actually going to ignore him, or if he's just generally struggling up to come up with something. The thought that the kid might not even be able to come up with reasonable punishment for such a minor thing on the spot is absolutely tragic. The teacher pushes the unhelpful thoughts aside. Another moment flashes past without any response, and Shouta decides to dig a bit further before the boy can gather the nerve to lie to his face again. "Was it disrespect that earned the bruise on the back of your neck, too?" the hero asked, tone casual. It was a difficult balancing act, trying to speak to his students about suspicions because the teenager never volunteered information on his own initiative. So Shouta always had to ask, push, dig for the answers he wanted. However, he was too blunt, pushed too hard, and then the boy would turn aggressively defensive and avoid him, something that was ultimately counterproductive in his end goal of earning the kid's trust. Tactless, he's actually sometimes called him. Shouta was a blunt and direct person, something that usually served him well in his particular line of work, but apparently left his social skills somewhat lacking. Honestly, Shouta couldn't care less, going through an entire song and dancing of beat around a bush when one could just go straight. Going through an entire song and dancing of beating around a bush when one could just point something out directly seemed so unnecessary and tedious. No, he didn't deny, just as vehemently as Shouta had sadly expected. But when the kid shifts for a moment, he ultimately doesn't pull away from the arm the kid had slung. He doesn't pull away from the arm the hero had slung over his shoulder at the insistence of abuse. And if nothing else, Shouta considers that a victory. Still, he would like an explanation. So he lets the silence take root again, waits. Cold was really starting to bite now, gradually numbing the exposed skin on his face now that wasn't actively moving anymore. Shouta ignores it, sits carefully, waiting as the kid next to him, restlessly fiddles with one of the straps on his backpack. "I fell," the boy mutters eventually, gaze fixed on the black strap he had twisted around his fingers. "You used that excuse last time," Shouta points out mercilessly, too frustrated and tired of the consistent lies to even pretend to entertain the possibility that the boy isn't being dishonest. "0 points for creativity, kid. Now tell me the truth." The boy tenses at that, ducking his head. Shouta kicks himself mentally because fuck, he's pushing too hard again, Now the boy was going to get up and hiss at him angrily for making insinuations and for talking about things he knows nothing about. Seconds passed in tense, conflicted silence. Shouta was quiet, afraid that the boy would attempt to distance himself again and rebuild the walls that the hero had been trying to slowly, carefully pick apart. By divine intervention, or more likely just timely stroke luck, doesn't come to that. Gradually the tension bleeds out, away from his pupils in creminence, until Shouta is no longer completely convinced that he's fucked things up in a major way. The kid starts after a while, before he stops, hesitates. Embarrassing. Shouta continues his silence. He waits patiently once more for his student to explain himself, though the kid doesn't seem to be in any great hurry to do so. After a moment, the boy runs a hand through his hair again, continues reluctantly. I had a panic attack, the boy says, the words soft and barely audible from the gestures vaguely from his face with his hands, but doesn't finish his sentence. The muzzle? Shouta guesses, seeing little reason to not call the contraception what it is. Yeah, the kid responds quietly. That. And you fell. Bumped into the edge of the counter, the kid agrees, still not looking at him. Didn't even notice at the time. The implication of the explanation is not lost on the hero. While he can imagine that it would be scary and stressful to be put in a muzzle against his will by people who are supposed to take care of him, a full-blown panic attack, well, spoke of underlying trauma. It was a distressing thought. However, Shouta does not miss how the explanation just so happens to also not incriminate the boy's foster parents of doing anything illegal. Might have happened that way, that he can't entirely be certain, but he's not completely convinced that the kid would lie about this. Even if it was true to some extent, the boy would certainly lie about details. However, Shouta knows that the boy is going to stick to the story, be it true or not, so he lets it go. For now. Come on, kid, he says, removing his arm and rolling back onto his feet after a moment of deliberation. Let's get out of here. The student releases a quiet breath next to him before climbing onto his own feet, throwing a backpack on again. Right, the boy mutters seemingly to himself. I need to catch the last train. No, Shouta states, after they left the dingy alleyway behind, once the boy falls into step beside him. You're coming with me. Shouta can see the kid make a face in his peripheral vision, like he disagrees, like he's going to argue. Waste of time, he thinks. His student should know by now he's picking battles he won't win. Even so, the boy opens his mouth to protest. Sensei, the teenager starts, placing the words carefully, obviously realizing he's picking an argument. I have to go home. Shouta doesn't slow down. Why are you out here, Hitoshi? He asks instead, as they cross the empty road. He'd prefer to get back onto the road, stay high off these streets, especially with the kid in tow. Because it had been quiet so far doesn't mean it would continue to stay that way. Compliancy had killed many heroes, it wouldn't kill him. Sure, you fought with your foster parents, he continues, doesn't miss how his protege looks away at the word fought. One day he would train his student out of his tells, when they were no longer providing such incredible usefulness to him. But you should be in bed, sleeping, he continues, scanning the building around him. There. And at the very least you should be at home, he stresses at the final word, before slowing to a stop, quickly mapping out a route. Then he scales the building he had decided on, only stopping and once he had pulled himself onto the edge of the roof. Turning, he looks down and gestures for his pupil to follow him. The teenager huffs as he hoists himself over the edge of the rooftop. Half a minute later, not quite as experienced with scaling buildings as Shouta himself. I was a bit too keyed up to go to sleep, the boy responds unsatisfactory once he had joined Shouta on the rooftop, balancing fearlessly on the edge for a moment before joining him further in. I wanted some fresh air. Shouta arches an eyebrow. So you decided to come all the way into the city to kick cans around, he says dryly, instead of just stepping outside. The boy averts his eyes again, flushing, probably embarrassed about having his lie so bluntly exposed. I'm going home now, Sensei. His student announces stiffly with an edge to his voice, making it obvious that I was fed up with Shota's insistence on pushing the topic. Good night. It was too bad for the kid. Shouta wasn't done by a long shot, because he'd already solved the puzzle. The hero watches as the kid stalks back to the edge, obviously intent on actually leaving before opening his mouth. They kicked you out, Shouta declares, watching the boy freeze at his words. That's why you're here instead of home, continues when the boy remains unmoving. The reason you were angry, isn't it? You can't go home. It's a particular guess, but the hero is confident in his deduction. It is all but confirmation when the kid doesn't respond, just stiffens. Further, silent. He's close now. So close. He can smell it like a shark smells blood in the water. How close the boy is to breaking, Shouta has grown attached to the kid. He's more than tired of seeing the boy get hurt. If he can get the team to admit it, then he could finally do something about it. The seething rage and frustration he has buried in his heart burns, and with the need for it to get his hands on the asshole hurting his student, his fucking kid. Maybe he's pushing too hard again, too fast. It's a gamble. It always is. But he has never been so close. He feels like he'd almost reach out and touch it. The admission he wants to hear. Kid, he speaks, frustration bleeding into his words. He can feel the adrenaline pummeling through his veins, urging him to act. You don't have to protect them, he continues. I know they are hurting you. You don't need to lie anymore, he urges, hoping the kid will take his cue, finally decide to trust him. You can see the kid's shoulders shake with suppressed emotion, but the boy, as always, remains silent. The kid was stubborn. The iron would serve him well someday, if only he learned to be stubborn about the right kind of things. Let me help you, kid, he urges, knowing that he sounds desperate, but not caring. Not about this. You don't have to go back there. The teenager twitches at his words. Shouta doesn't hesitate to pounce at the perceivable crack in the boy's resolve. The anger burning in his heart burns at the injustice, at the powerlessness, at his inability to help the kid he's grown to care for. In the end, the only one standing between the kid and the hero's ability to help was the kid himself. Hitoshi speaks, a command this time. The kid flinches at his tone, balling his fists, every line in his body tense with upset. Look at me, Shouta insists, stepping closer once again. His pupil reluctantly obeys. Talk to me, kid, Shouta says after a second, less of a demand and more of a plea. You can see the kid struggle, his expression visibly torn as he wavers, presumably between his desire to confess to get away from the horrible situation he was stuck in, and his conditioning to hide the evidence that anything was wrong with it. It is to his bitter frustration and disappointment. The kid's conditioning wins out in the end. You're wrong, the teenager bites out a second as he looks away, refusing to meet the hero's eyes. They're not hurting me, Sensei. You don't know what you're talking about. Shouta clenches his fists. He can feel his nails digging into his palms as he simmers his rage. His heart grows into a wildfire in his veins. He wants to hunt down the boy's foster parents, punch them in the face, wants to track down every last person who made the kid be this way and kill them. Feeling is blinding, overwhelming, like an inferno of all-encompassing rage in his chest. Drawing a deep breath, Shouta breathes through the feeling, breathes through the burning need for retaliatory violence, and tries to push his anger away. Even through his rage, he isn't blind to the effect it has on the kid. The tense line in his shoulders, increasing wearing look in his face. The way the boy stuffs his hands in his pockets to try and hide the trembling. Fuck. His anger has no place here. It's unhelpful at best, actively damaging at worst. Shouta would never lay a hand on the kid in anger, but it's more than clear to him that the boy believes he would. Hating himself for losing his temper, the hero tries to force his anger down. The fury in his heart doesn't abate. He draws another deep breath, focusing on the numbing feeling of the cold night air on his skin, on the sounds of the wind blowing, on the fact that he is probably terrifying the kid he's trying to earn the trust of. He focuses on his breath until the wildfire in his heart cools down into a smolder. He is certain that he is successful managing to suppress his rage, tucked it away for targets much more deserving. Once he's sure he can control himself again, he speaks. "Come here, kid," Shouta says, halting. The incredibly guarded way the boy looks at him. His heart physically hurts in his chest at the way the teenager hesitates to obey for a very long time. Like he's scared of what Shouta will do. Like he's certain he will be hurt. Eventually, the teen takes a reluctant step towards him, then another. Then with an air of dread and resignation, the hero forces himself to stand ready. Even though part of his heart threatens to break from such a misplaced suspicion. The kid stops right in front of him, close enough for Shouta to hit him, like the kid so obviously thinks he will do. Shouta hates it. So he does the only thing. He grabs the flinching teenager by the shoulders, pulls him into a forcible hug, wraps his arm around him, hugs him close. Shouta holds his kid tight as he feels the boy draw a shaky breath, feels the kid shudder in his arms. Maybe he can't force the kid to admit anything, but he can sure as hell refuse to act the way the teenager so obviously dreads and expects he can prove himself trustworthy. Just one step at a time. He will. Hey guys, yes, sadly, this is the end of today's one-shot fic. As always, information will be in the description. Hope to see you again sometime soon. Bye!